Hi and welcome. In this video I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the new features in Lightroom version 11 October 2021 update. Now this release has one huge improvement and a couple of little tiddly ones. Now if you thought this release was just like any other, well, think again. We've now got masking in Lightroom. Yeah, masking, you heard right. So let's dig in and see how it all works. Okay, first up we've got a change to the local adjustments panel, which sits on top here. Let's just scroll up. So you can see here that this looks quite different. First three are still the same. We've got the crop tool, we've got the spot removal tool, and we've got the old dreaded red eye. And you'll see that there seems to be some things missing, but actually they've just been incorporated into a new masking space. So if I click on this masking little icon here, what I'll get is my new masking panel. And here are the three things that are missing. We've got the brush tool, we've got the linear gradient, and we've got the radial gradient. But wait, there is more. Oh yes, there is. We've now got some brand new tools that's been brought in. We've got select subject, we've got select sky, we've got color range, we've got luminance range, and we've got depth range. All brand new to Lightroom. Is that not amazing? Okay, let's start with the brush tool. So I'm just going to click on the brush tool icon, and you'll see we've got the familiar brush settings panel, which is at the top now, and then we've got all the adjustments that you can make. Well, nothing really new there, apart from they've just swapped the brush panel from the bottom to the top. But now you can see we've got this new masking panel come up. Now I think the way to think about this is that masking and selections are just other sides of the same coin. They're exactly the same thing, just displayed differently. And I think what Adobe's done is try to get us now into a parallel path with Photoshop, so we can actually use masks. Now previously you would see that little dot when you wanted to make a local adjustment, and you'd paint around it and you'd get a red rubylith mask appear, and that's what it was. It was a mask, but it was displaying a selection, and you would only get any of these adjustments would happen within that red area. Well, now all that's happening is exactly the same, but it's been converted into a mask for you straight away, and you can add and subtract just like you could before with the subtract from selection. It works exactly the same, but it's just presented now as more of a mask, and this is really useful. So we've now got a new mask, which is here. We've got the show overlay tick, which shows you exactly what you are masking. If we go over here, we can change the masking color, and then anywhere where you've got three dots, it means that you've got a drop down menu. So there's some additional things here with those three dots. Now at the moment nothing's changed, nothing seems to have happened because I've got a black mask. So basically nothing that I've done, because I haven't done anything yet, will show up, and it will show up on this layer underneath. So now if I make an adjustment, let's say I just want to lift the exposure a little bit and I start to paint, and you can see that that has actually lightened that area for me, but it's also created this brush, and this is the part that is here, that little brush icon there. This is the bit that I'm going to be adjusting. I could add to the selection, or I could subtract from the selection, or add to the mask or subtract from the mask, and you can see on the mask itself that little area there is coming through, just like if you were using Photoshop. But now on the brush part, on the brush layer, you see we've got our own three dots, and again if we click on that, then we get a drop down menu. We can rename things, we can duplicate, we can copy with paste, and we can delete. All the things in that little menu there. So if I wanted to add to this selection, I could click add, and then I can use any of these to add. But let's just stick with brush for the minute, and we'll just add to this mask. Or I've now got brush 2, which is the add to bit of a selection. Or I could subtract, and again, if we use the brush tool, I could subtract from the mask. And you can see now that we've still got that final mask icon there, which is really cool. But now I've got 3 little brushes. I've done 2 additional. Well, I've done the initial one, and then I've added to the selection, and then you can see I've subtracted from the selection. You can see that little minus sign, and that all adds together to create that mask. Now if you want to show the overlay, then you can click this little tick, and it actually shows you the area in a red rubylith where you've actually made a selection or made a mask. Now if you want to rename these, you can. So let's just go and say brush 3, that's the subtract one that we've done there. We can go to the 3 little dots, and we can say rename, and I can call that subtract 1. Call it anything you like, and click OK. So you can give them some meaningful names so you can see at a glance exactly what they are. And if you get to the point where one of them just hasn't worked and you want to do it again, then you can delete it. So I can go to my 3 little dots again. I'll click on that subtract one, go to my 3 little dots, and then I can delete subtract 1, and there it was, gone. Okay, let's get rid of this mask completely. So I'm going to right click and delete mask 1. And now let's try and lighten up these areas that are quite dark in this image. So again, I think the brush tool is what we're going to need. There we've got our new mask. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'll just make my brush a little bit smaller with the square brackets, is to paint around, say, this area here. And we've got another area here that I might just want to lighten up a bit just to see the detail that's in it. So now I've got my mask, I can add or subtract to it, but at the moment I could add and subtract from it, but at the moment I just want to make the adjustment. So let's try the shadows, and you can see that as soon as you start making adjustments, the red rubylith switches off, so you can see what you're doing. And you can see now, if I just pull the shadows backwards and forwards, I can just lighten up and show a little bit of detail in those areas, which is pretty cool. Now we've got some tree here, and I could, if I just went really careful around this edge, I could probably make a pretty good adjustment around here if I wanted to lighten these trees up. But there is a better way, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So let's say the next step will be to make a seriously good selection of this sky. Okay, rather than do it with the brush, what we've got now is a marvellous new feature called Select Sky. So if I go up to Create New Mask, and I've got Select Sky, and this is an AI feature. So Photoshop does all the work for you in trying to intelligently select where is sky and where is not sky. So I just click that, we get the new mask, and now look at that. That's not done a bad job. Couple of little areas that could be better, but if I now turn off the show overlay and then we make an adjustment, so let's say we'll bring the highlights down, and you can see it's only affecting the sky, which is absolutely amazing for one click. I mean, come on. I'll drop down the shadows, or lighten the shadows a little bit on that. Right, now what happens if, like here, the church, it's a little bit in shadow, and we wanted to lift the shadows in the church a little bit? Well, what we could do, we could get the brush, but it would be a right fiddly job going around all these edges. But now we've got a really good selection of a sky. I'll just click on that. You can see that we've got a really good selection going round those edges. And so what we can do now is we can inverse that selection, and then we've got the ground selected. And that's absolutely wicked. But just an FYI for you, that the inverse command is not found in the mask layer. If you go and have a look in there, no inverse. The inverse always happens in the subordinate layer. So if I go to my Sky 1 layer and click on that, here I can now find the invert command. And if I invert this selection, you'll see now that I've got not sky selected. So if I wanted to lift the shadows a little bit on that, I could do. Okay, next up is the linear gradient tool. So let's have a look at another image for that. And here I've got two separate areas. Really, I've got the sky and I've got the foreground. So what we can do, we could have a linear gradient on the sky first. So again, I'm going to click on linear gradient, brings me a new mask up, click and drag, down to somewhere like that. Let's take it up a little bit more. There we go. And now I can bring the highlights down a little bit on the sky. So now I've got a gradual drop from top to bottom over the sky. I can do exactly the same for the foreground. So again, we'll create a new mask. I'll use my linear gradient and I'll drag up from the bottom. And then I'll lighten the shadows a little bit. You can see it's just giving us a little bit of lightness on that. I could probably close it up because you can move these lines about, so I could close this up a little bit and then move it all the way up, so I'm having more of a lightening effect. And there you can see, let's have another look at that with my shadows. I've actually got a nice gradual lightening of the shadows in the bottom area. The next is the radial. We've got a radial tool, and if I wanted to say make a little bit of a spotlight effect on the boat, I could do. Let's go to create a new mask and I'll have my radial gradient, and again I'll click in the middle and drag it out. I can resize this at any time, but here I've got a nice soft gradient coming out from the middle, and then I can say, well, let's boost the shadows a little bit more, just to add a little bit of a, I could probably add a little bit of exposure as well, just to lighten up the boat and pick it out from the background. There we go. So now I've got three different masks here. Got the where we've got the two radial gradients, and if I wanted to, I could, like you said, I've got that. I could use the brush tool, and I could brush into an area. You can mix and match any of these tools to create the effect that you need to effect. Okay, next up is an incredible tool that we've got courtesy of Photoshop, and again it's an AI tool, and it's select subject, and this allows you to select the main subject in your image, and Photoshop will do this quite intelligently. So here we've got this guy is a little bit he's lit from the wrong side. I'd like to lighten him up a little bit, so I'm going to go into the masking panel and I'm going to select subject, and you'll wait a second. Photoshop does all the hard work for you, and bing a bong, there you go, we've got the subject selected, and now we've got him on his own mask, so we can now start to make adjustments. So I can lift the shadows a little bit, maybe add a bit of clarity just to crispen him up a little bit, and that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool for a one click. Come on, you've got to admit that. I mean, it's been excellent in Photoshop, and I think I'm going to be using that an awful lot in Lightroom now. Okay, next we've got colour range. Now, colour range is really good if we've got a really vast difference in colours in an image. So this one we've got a really bright red jacket here, and we've got some pretty muted tones in the background. So we should be able to use this tool to get a good cutout here, a good extraction. So I'm going into the develop module, and then I'm going to go into my masking panel. And this time I'm going to select color range. Now I've already changed my overlay colour to green because the normal one of red isn't going to show up very well against a red background. So all I did, I just went into this colour swatch and I clicked on green rather than red. And that should give me a nice difference so I can actually see where the adjustment's going to be. I've got my overlay on. I'm going to go and click into the image. So somewhere here, if I click and drag, select a few tones, and let go, well, that gives me a pretty good selection to start with. I could refine it a little bit by just dragging this over a little. Okay, I'm bringing a bit more in than I actually want, but just that little bit should be okay, I think. Now, I don't really want this to be half and half. So what I'm going to do is get my brush tool, so I'm going to subtract from the selection. I'm going to use the brush tool and I'll just brush over that part there. That's pretty good. And now what I can do is change the colour. So with my hue slider down here, I can click and drag, and we've got him going a nice purple colour. Well, that's not bad actually. Quite like that. I think it works nicely. So we'll go back into the colour range one just to do a final little tweak, just to fill in these little bits here, but he may have brought some of the colours out in his face. So again, I can do a subtract from selection. I'll go with my brush tool again and just brush over any areas you think may have been affected that you don't want affected. And I don't think that's bad. Yeah, seems to be fine, that. So there we are, the colour range command. It's an excellent tool if you've got a large contrast in colour. You can see here that this was bright red against quite a muted background, so ideally suited to this tool for making your selection or making your mask. And lastly, but not leastly, we've got Luminance Range. Let's have a look where that is. So I'll enter my mask panel, and there it is, Luminance Range. Now Luminance Range creates a mask by selecting luminance values, luminance being the brightness or darkness or tonality of your image. So it does it with this rather than colour. Now luminance masking does give much softer and much more pleasing transitions than other methods of selection that you couldn't really do with a brush because it would end up looking a bit messy. So what do we do? Okay, well, I'm going to click on Luminance Range, and there it gives us as mask, and now I'm going to click on an area that I want to make the selection of, so something like that. And you'll see what it's done is it's now created this overlay based on the majority of the water. And I want to keep that. I'll just put the show overlay on just to show you, but there are still some pretty harsh transitions, and we can change that by using this slider up here, the Luminance Range slider. This one here is the drop off, so if I move that to one side, what it'll do is it'll soften the transitions even further. It will also bring a lot more in the outside, but we can get rid of that. What I just want is my transitions on that to look nice and soft with this water. This piece here, between this little oblong and this little oblong, those are the pixels that are getting selected. And so if I make that longer, you'll see it'll start selecting more of the image, which I don't really want it to do. I can also move that away from that edge, but that's not doing what I want it to do either, because it's cutting through and leaving me with my water again, and I want to adjust the water. I want to have that selected. So basically I could leave it somewhere like that. You've also got this slider at the end, but as we're we're right up against that end, it's not really going to do us much good for this particular image. So I'll just make that a little bit bigger, and I think I'll leave it at that. I've got some nice soft transitions now in here. So now what I need to do is to get rid of everything else that I don't want. So I'm going to subtract, and I'm going to use a brush to subtract from this mask, and I'm just going to clear out anything that's on the rocks, that's in the background, that I don't want adjusting. So now I'm doing this quickly, but you would take a little bit more care. I'll just go over all the pieces that I don't want to be adjusted. So anything basically that's not water. And we've got a couple more here, and you can do this pretty quickly. We've got the edge of the bank here, which wants the green showing through, and then with maybe a couple of rocks going on here that we want, and I'll take that as being done. And now what we can do is make our adjustment. So let's start with the highlights. Let's click and drag so we can take the highlights down, or we can pull the highlights up and make it even more like it's nice soft water. If we want to, we could say warm it up a little bit with the temperature slider. Just give it a little bit of warmth to match the rest of the scene. And I think that looks okay. I'll just click to show you that, and I think that looks fine. And to finish off, a couple of minor updates that you might find of interest. One of them is in the develop module, and here we can see that in the presets panel there's some extra ones. So like where we've got style cinematic, we've got CN01 through to CN10. We've now got style cinematic 2, where we've got CN11 through to CN18. And the same comes with your travel. We've got travel, and we've got travel 2. Give them a look in, have a look, see if you like any of them. And the other thing is in the library module, it's in the metadata panel. Now metadata, you can display lots of different options: minimal, quick describe, EXIF and IPTC, but you have an awful lot of scrolling to do, and there's an awful lot of information in there. Well now, if you navigate to the default section, you'll see that there's a little button appeared at the bottom now, and this is the customize button. This lets you customize the default view to whatever you want to be in it. So I can click customize, and then anything that's ticked obviously appears. If you've got something that you think that'd be useful in my default section, then if you click megapixels, then I'll click done, and there it is. It appears in my default section. And I think that's quite useful. Well, that's it for this video. I do hope you liked it. If you did, please give me a like, or even better, leave me a comment. All of these things help me get the most out of the YouTube algorithm and to reach more people. Thank you if you can, and I'll see you in the very next video. Bye for now.